My husband abandoned me and our kids with $50,000 in debt. Figure it out yourself, he laughed. 3 months later, he was desperate, begging me to save him. What I did next left him in shock. I woke up to the sound of silence. An eerie, unnatural kind. The kind that makes your stomach twist before your mind even catches up. My husband's side of the bed was empty, cold, untouched. At first, I thought maybe he had gone for an early morning jog, something he never did. Then I noticed his phone charger was gone. His wallet, his closet door slightly open, revealing only my clothes inside. Something was wrong. I scrambled out of bed and checked the bathroom. Empty. My heart pounded as I rushed down the hallway. The kids were still asleep, their soft breathing the only thing keeping me from falling apart right then and there. I tiptoed downstairs, my pulse hammering in my ears. The living room looked the same, except for the missing TV. I turned into the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. A single yellow sticky note on the counter. I snatched it up with shaky fingers. Figure it out yourself. That was it. No explanation. No goodbye. Just 5 cruel words scribbled in his lazy, arrogant handwriting. I grabbed my phone and called him. Straight to voicemail. I texted. The messages didn't even deliver. He had blocked me. A sinking dread settled in my chest as I ran to check the bank account. I had expected to see something bad. Maybe a few $100s left. Something selfish but survivable. But when I logged in, my heart stopped. Balance. $0. No. No. This had to be a mistake. I checked the savings account. Also empty. I checked our emergency fund. Gone. My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped my phone. I opened the transaction history, and that's when reality hit me like a freight train. In the last 24 hours, my husband had drained every single cent from our accounts. Transfers to himself, cash withdrawals, expensive purchases, all of it. He had cleaned me out. I felt sick. My knees buckled, and I had to grip the counter to keep myself from collapsing. Then, like a dam breaking, everything started hitting me at once. The unpaid credit card bills, the mortgage, the utilities, the car payments. I logged into my email, searching for any sign of what else he had done, and that's when I saw them. Late notices, overdue balances, final warnings. And then the worst one, an eviction notice. My breath caught in my throat. How? Why? I had been paying the rent every month. Or at least I thought I had. I clicked on the message and felt my stomach drop. The payments had been stopped 3 months ago. I gasped, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Then it clicked. My husband had been in charge of handling the rent. I trusted him. He always said he took care of it. But he hadn't. Instead, he had been stealing the money. A cold, horrible realization crept over me. This wasn't an impulsive decision. He had planned this. He had been plotting my downfall for months. My vision blurred with angry, helpless tears. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break every single piece of furniture in this house, but then I heard a small voice behind me. Mom! I turned around so fast I nearly stumbled. My daughter, Emma, stood in the doorway, her curly hair a tangled mess from sleep, her big brown eyes blinking up at me. She clutched her stuffed bear against her chest, her tiny face scrunched in worry. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile onto my face. Hey, baby, what are you doing up? She yawned, rubbing her eyes. I heard you walking around. Is everything okay? My throat tightened. No, nothing is okay. But I couldn't tell her that. I crouched down, pulling her into a hug. Of course, sweetheart. Go back to bed, okay? She nodded, but before she left, she hesitated. Where's Daddy? The words were like a knife to my gut. I forced another smile, my lips trembling. He had to go somewhere for a little while. Emma frowned but didn't push it. Okay. She shuffled back toward her room, and I stood there in the dark, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. As soon as I heard her door click shut, I let the first tear fall. And then another, and another, until I was sobbing, silent and broken in the middle of my destroyed life. The aftermath. The next few days were a blur of panic, humiliation, and devastation. The electricity was already past due. The landlord called, demanding payment. The credit card companies wouldn't stop harassing me. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, surrounded by bills, my mind spiraling. I called his family, his friends. No one knew where he was. Or worse, they did, but they wouldn't tell me. One of his old college buddies actually had the audacity to say, "I mean, you gotta respect the guy for pulling this off." Respect? I hung up, shaking with rage. Then, as if the universe wanted to see how much more I could take, I found out the car wasn't even in my name. It had been leased under his credit. And guess what? He stopped making payments. The repo company was coming for it. I was officially at rock bottom. Until the final blow came. The one that sent me from broken to furious. A picture. Someone sent me a picture of my husband. Smiling. Drinking champagne. With another woman. While I was drowning in debt and facing eviction, he was out there celebrating his new life. And that's when something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to crumble. I was going to fight. If he thought he could walk away scot-free, he was dead wrong. I stared at the picture on my phone, my body going numb. My husband, no, that man, was out there living like he hadn't just left his wife and kids in financial ruin. He had taken every dollar, every ounce of stability, and left us to rot. And now he was celebrating. My blood boiled. But beneath the rage was something even stronger, determination. He thought he had won. He thought I was going to cry in a corner while he enjoyed his new life. He had no idea what was coming. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and grabbed a notebook. I needed a plan. Unraveling his lies. The first thing I did was retrace his steps. I started small, calling the bank, checking every financial document I had left. He had been careful, but not careful enough. His withdrawals were sloppy. He had pulled large sums of cash too quickly, leaving a clear paper trail. And then I found something even more interesting. He hadn't closed our joint credit cards. He had just maxed them out. That meant one thing. He still had financial ties to me. That was his first mistake. I called the credit card companies, explained the situation, and requested account freezes. While I couldn't erase the debt, I could make sure he couldn't use them anymore. If he tried, declined, I hoped he enjoyed that little surprise. But that was just the beginning. I needed to know where he was. I scrolled through the picture again, focusing on the details. The background was blurry, but I spotted a neon sign and name. I zoomed in. A bar. I searched it online. It was in a city 3 hours away. Not far. And then, something clicked. He hadn't just run. He had settled. He was comfortable enough to go out drinking, posting pictures, flaunting his new life. That was his second mistake. People who are truly trying to disappear don't act like that. I wasn't just going to find him. I was going to destroy everything he had built. His ego was his weakness. Men like him, they thrive on control. They think they're untouchable. That's why I knew he wouldn't be able to resist showing off. So I tested a theory. I created a fake social media account. New name, new face, new everything. I found his profile, the one he thought I didn't know about, and sent a follow request. Within an hour. Accepted. He was that stupid. And just like that, I had a front row seat to his downfall. His page was full of arrogant, thoughtless posts. Photos of fancy dinners, expensive clothes, things he never bought for our family. He captioned one picture, "New beginnings, no baggage winking face." I clenched my jaw. Baggage. Our kids were baggage. But instead of getting angry, I smirked. Because he had given me exactly what I needed. A location tag. He was so desperate to impress his new friends that he had posted a picture of his overpriced steak, with the restaurant name right there for me to see. His third mistake. Setting the trap. Now that I knew where he was, it was time to tighten the noose. First, I called our landlord and explained everything. At first, he was furious. He had every right to be. But when I told him about the fraudulent rent payments and the eviction notice I had just found out about, he softened. Then he dropped a bombshell. "The lease is still in both of your names," he said. "Legally, he's still responsible for payment." My heart pounded. Of course. My husband had planned to leave, but he hadn't taken the time to remove himself from the lease. That meant if he ever wanted to rent another place, his name would be flagged. I had leverage. I asked the landlord to hold off on eviction for now. I had an idea, hitting him where it hurts. I needed money. Fast. I went back to our shared accounts and checked the one thing I hadn't before, our tax records. Bingo! Our last tax return had been filed jointly. The refund? Still pending. He had been so busy stealing cash that he forgot about the tax money sitting in limbo. I called the IRS and reported him for financial abandonment. They flagged his activity, and since the refund was tied to my name as well, I was able to claim it before he could. $8,000. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Enough to keep the lights on, feed my kids, and fight back. And then I went one step further. Using the social media account, I messaged him, posing as a job recruiter. I dangled the bait. A fake executive position with a six-figure salary, benefits, everything a narcissist like him would want. I even threw in some flattery. Your skills and experience are exactly what we're looking for. And just like I expected, he took it. His fourth mistake. Watching him crumble. Days passed. I waited. And then, late one night, my phone rang. Him. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. And another. Desperate. Panicked. I played the message. Babe, listen, I messed up, okay? I need your help. His voice was shaky. Something happened with my bank accounts. I tried to pay for something, and it got declined. I don't know what's going on, but I need money. Please, just call me back. I smiled. Now, he was the one begging. He tried again the next day. And the next. Each time, his voice got more frantic. Please, I just need you to talk to me. I don't have anywhere to go. Then, finally, a message that made my stomach tighten, not from fear, but from satisfaction. They're kicking me out of my place. Good. All those lavish nights out, all those stolen dollars, gone. The moment I shut down the accounts and froze our joint financial ties, his entire world collapsed. His biggest mistake, thinking I would stay weak. The final blow. With nowhere to run, he tried to come home. But when he showed up, looking ragged and exhausted, his key didn't work. He banged on the door, his voice shaking. Let me in. We can fix this. I opened it just enough to look him dead in the eyes. Figure it out yourself. And then I closed the door. Forever. I stood behind the door, heart pounding, as his fist slammed against the wood again. Open the damn door. His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through every word. Please, just talk to me. I didn't move, didn't blink. I had spent months crying over this man, months rebuilding the life he tried to destroy. And now, he was the one falling apart. Karma had finally knocked on his door. I listened as his breathing turned ragged. He muttered something under his breath, a string of curses, then kicked the door hard enough to rattle the frame. But he wasn't getting in. Not today. Not ever. I turned the deadbolt for good measure. And then, just as I was about to walk away, silence. No more pounding. No more yelling. He was gone. For a moment, I let out a shaky breath, thinking it was over. But in reality, his world was only just beginning to fall apart. His past catches up to him. The next morning, I was greeted with a sight that nearly made me laugh. Him, sitting on the curb across the street, his head in his hands. He looked wrecked. Dark circles under his eyes, clothes wrinkled like he hadn't changed in days. I grabbed my coffee, stepped outside onto the porch, and took a slow, deliberate sip. He lifted his head. Our eyes met. For a split second, I saw something flicker across his face, relief maybe, like he actually thought I'd feel sorry for him. He was wrong. I raised an eyebrow, then tilted my mug in a mock toast before turning on my heel and walking back inside. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. And another. By the time I checked my inbox, it was full of frantic messages. Look, I messed up, okay? I just need a place to stay for a couple of nights. I'll figure things out. Another one. Please. I don't have anywhere to go. And then, the real kicker. They're coming after me. I paused, rereading that last message. Who's coming after him? Debt, lies, and angry people. I didn't have to wonder for long. That afternoon, a car I didn't recognize pulled up to the curb. The door swung open, and two men stepped out, both wearing expensive suits, both looking pissed. I stayed inside, peeking through the curtain as they approached him. One of them grabbed him by the collar. You really thought you could run? My ex flinched, glancing around like he was looking for an escape. There's been a misunderstanding, he stammered. I just need a little more time. Time! The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. You owe a lot of people money. And guess what? They're not feeling very patient. My ex swallowed hard. His hand shook, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I saw fear in his eyes. His final plea. That night, I got another call. I should have ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I picked up. He was silent at first. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. They're going to kill me. I leaned against the counter. Sounds like a you problem. Please, he whispered. I know I don't deserve it, but... I cut him off. You stole from me. From your own kids. I know. His voice cracked. I was stupid. Selfish. I thought I could fix it before you found out, but everything got out of control. I swear, I never meant to hurt you. I clenched my jaw. He never meant to hurt me? He drained our accounts, left us in debt, laughed while I begged for answers. He had no idea what real pain felt like. You did this to yourself, I said coldly. And now, you're paying the price. I hung up, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, because he wasn't my problem anymore. I set my phone down, staring at the screen as the call ended. A strange calm washed over me. 4 months, I had been the one pleading, begging for answers, for stability, for some shred of decency from the man who had ripped my life apart. Now, he was the one drowning, and I had no intention of throwing him a lifeline. The streets are no place for the weak. Morning came, and when I stepped onto the porch with my coffee, I wasn't surprised to see him still there, curled up on the curb like some stray dog. His once crisp dress shirt was wrinkled, stained, hanging off his frame like a ghost of the man he used to be. His hair was disheveled, dark stubble covering his jaw. He looked nothing like the smug, arrogant man who once stood in our kitchen, telling me I was overreacting when I realized the bank had drained our accounts. No, the man in front of me now was broken, and it was only going to get worse. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the steam warm my face as he lifted his head. His eyes met mine, hollow and desperate. Then he stood, staggered toward me. I didn't move. Please, he rasped, his voice hoarse like he hadn't had a drop of water in days. Can we just talk? I raised an eyebrow. Talk. He nodded, swallowing hard. I have nowhere else to go. They took everything. I took another sip, savoring the moment. How ironic. No one left to save him. He followed me up the porch steps, but I blocked the door with my arm. You think I'm letting you inside? I scoffed. You must be even dumber than I thought. His shoulders sagged. I just need... He cut himself off, rubbing a hand down his face. I don't know what I need. I tilted my head. Well, I needed my savings, my security, my dignity. But you made sure I lost all of that, didn't you? He shut his eyes, as if bracing for a hit. I messed up. I get it. Do you? My voice was ice. Because last I checked, you were the one who left me with nothing. And now what? You want my help. His silence was answer enough. I laughed. Actually laughed. Go ask your friends for help. Oh, wait. I tapped my chin mockingly. You burned those bridges too, didn't you? His jaw clenched. You think I don't know that? I stepped closer. And yet, here you are. His breath hitched. You want to know the difference between us? I asked, voice deathly quiet. When you left me to fend for myself, I fought. I didn't sit around, hoping someone would save me. I saved myself. He looked away. You, on the other hand? I let out a disappointed sigh. You're weak. That hit him harder than any slap ever could, watching the fall in real time. The days passed, and he kept showing up. One morning, I spotted him near the diner down the street, sitting on a bench, gnawing on what looked like stale bread. Another time, I saw him pacing in front of a grocery store, hesitating before stepping inside, probably debating if he had the nerve to steal. And then there was the night I found him in the alley behind our old house, shivering under a street lamp, looking so lost and small that, for the briefest moment, I almost felt something close to pity. Almost. Instead, I watched. Watched as he realized no one was coming to save him. Watched as the life he once bragged about, the money, the power, the control, all crumbled into dust. This was a man who once thought he was invincible. And now, he couldn't even scrape together enough for a hot meal. Karma was a beautiful thing. The final, desperate plea. One night, as I was locking up the house, I heard it. A soft, broken knock. I knew who it was before I even looked. I opened the door just enough to see him standing there, the porch light casting harsh shadows across his face. He had never looked worse. Pale, sunken eyes, cheeks hollowed from days of not eating. His once expensive shoes were caked in mud, the sole of one flapping loose. He looked like a man who had finally hit rock bottom. His voice barely made it past his lips. I don't have anywhere else to go. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. And he exhaled shakily. Please, just one night. I let the silence stretch, let him squirm. Then I gave him the same cold, final words he once threw at me. That sounds like a you problem. And I shut the door in his face. The moment the door shut, I felt it. Relief. Not the fleeting kind that comes after a deep breath or a good night's sleep. No, this was something deeper. Something final. I had spent months carrying the weight of what he had done to me, the betrayal, the destruction, the struggle to rebuild. But in that moment, as he stood outside in the cold, abandoned by everyone, I realized I was free. For the first time in a long time, my life was truly mine again. And his was over before he even knew it. A house that finally felt like home. In the weeks that followed, I barely thought about him. I filled the space he left behind with warmth, with laughter, with things that truly mattered. My home, once a place of stress and uncertainty, became my sanctuary. I repainted the walls, choosing colors that made me feel alive instead of the dull, lifeless tones he preferred. I bought fresh flowers every Sunday, their scent filling the air like a quiet reminder that life was still beautiful. I cooked meals just for me, real meals, not the rushed, thoughtless ones I used to make when I was too exhausted from fighting his battles. And most importantly, I started dreaming again. For so long, my future had been tied to his whims, his decisions, his mistakes. But now, the possibilities stretched out in front of me like an open road, waiting to be explored. He was no longer my problem. He was just a shadow in my past, his fall from grace. But the world hadn't forgotten him. His name, once associated with power and wealth, had become nothing more than a cautionary tale. People whispered about him in coffee shops, shaking their heads at how quickly it all crumbled. Did you hear? He lost everything. One day he was on top of the world, the next gone. Serves him right. You can't treat people like that and expect to win forever. Even those who once called him a friend kept their distance. No one wanted to be associated with a failure. And failure was all he had left. The inevitable end. I hadn't seen him in months when I got the call. It came from a number I didn't recognize, but something in me knew. Hello. The voice on the other end was quiet, hesitant. I don't know if you want to know, but it's about him. I sat down, gripping the phone tighter. What about him? A pause. Then a sigh. He's gone. The words should have shocked me. They should have stirred something. Grief, sadness, even a trace of regret. But all I felt was an eerie sense of inevitability. How? I asked, my voice steady. The person hesitated. They found him in a shelter. He'd been sick for a while, but I guess no one really noticed. Or cared. No one noticed. No one cared. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. Once, he had everything. He walked through life with an arrogance that made him believe he was untouchable. That the rules didn't apply to him. That no matter how many people he hurt, he'd always come out on top. But the world had a way of balancing things out. And in the end, he died alone. Forgotten. Exactly the way he left me. Moving forward without looking back. I didn't go to his funeral. I heard it was small. Hardly anyone showed up. The ones who did were there out of obligation, not love. I didn't need closure. I had already found it the night I shut the door in his face. Instead, I kept living. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but because I deserved to. Because after everything, I had finally learned. I was never the one who needed saving. He was, and he had never been strong enough to save himself.